Excuse me, girls, can I verify something about your tickets? That voice, sharp and cutting through the buzz of LAX Terminal C, belonged to Karen Mitchell, a longtime gate agent who'd seen her fair share of passengers over the years. But something about these two, something made her pause. Maya and Zara Thompson, both 17, both dressed in neatly pressed blazers and fresh sneakers, looked up from their phones near Gate 42. They were calm, collected, just waiting for their first-class flight to board. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, holding up their boarding passes, her tone polite but curious. Karen narrowed her eyes. Her gaze scanned the elegant seats, the polished clothes, and the undeniable confidence radiating from the girls. "These seats, how exactly did you purchase them?" Her voice had shifted now, less inquiry, more accusation. "With our credit cards," Zara replied calmly. She could already feel the heat of people's eyes turning toward them. The attention was unwanted, but not unfamiliar. Karen wasn't satisfied. "I'm going to need to see some additional verification," she said loud enough that a few heads nearby turned. The terminal buzz faded for Maya. In its place, the sting of recognition. That subtle shift in how people looked at them, judged them, assumed something must be off. That's how it starts, isn't it? She and her sister exchanged a quick glance. Unspoken but clear, this wasn't about tickets. It never really is. Around them, a few whispers floated by. Karen kept pushing. "We've had issues with fraudulent bookings lately." Still polite, still composed, Zara replied. "We have the receipts. We can show you." Maya added, "And the confirmation email too." The boarding time ticked closer, 6:47 p.m. 8 minutes until first-class passengers were supposed to start lining up. Karen crossed her arms. "Corporate policy requires verification for irregular passengers." Maya blinked. "Irregular how?" "You know exactly what I mean," Karen said, and that was all the confirmation they needed. Zara reached into her pocket, but not for ID. She opened Instagram Live. With a few swipes, she was broadcasting. Within seconds, 47 viewers joined. A quiet rebellion, a digital witness. Maya held up her phone displaying the confirmation email and credit card records. Karen barely glanced at them. "These could be fake," she said. Zara's hand trembled just a little, but she didn't lower the phone. She just kept filming. The crowd was watching now. Some with sympathy, others with suspicion. A businessman leaned toward his wife, whispering, "Probably used their parents' cards without permission." Another muttered, "They'll learn a lesson today." Their phones buzzed. One missed call from Dad, another from legal debt, a third from board secretary. Zara ignored them all. She needed the world to see what was happening. Not edited, not explained, just witnessed. Viewer count 451. Comments started pouring in. "This is messed up. Somebody call the news. I bet the tickets are real." Karen raised her radio. "Security may be needed. These girls are refusing verification." Before the call could go through Brad Chen, the gate supervisor appeared. He looked stressed, sweating slightly, adjusting his tie like it was strangling him. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, though his body language said he'd already picked a side. "These girls claim they're in first class," Karen said. "But there's clearly a system error. They probably got upgraded by mistake." Maya opened her wallet slowly, revealing a lounge wristband. A business card peeked out. Neither girl mentioned the platinum Amex cards in their blazers. Not yet. Zara, still filming, spoke evenly. "We purchased these seats legally. We have every right to board." Karen laughed, loud and dismissive. "Honey rights are for paying customers. And I doubt you paid for these yourselves." People shifted uncomfortably. Then an older black woman stepped forward, her eyes kind and warm. "Excuse me, I can help pay for economy seats if that would settle things." "Thank you, ma'am," Maya replied, her voice soft but firm. We already have our seats. More whispers. Karen's radio buzzed. Karen, boarding needs to start. What's your status? Minor situation, she said quickly, requesting supervisor assistance. The businessman from earlier stepped up. Some of us have connections to make. Just bump them. Zara's stream ticked up 1 to 247 viewers. Comments were growing louder. Still happening in 2025. They're handling this better than I would. Where are their parents? Their luggage sat neatly beside them. Each bag tagged with Priority Diamond. A status few flyers could afford. A status that came with serious loyalty, thousands of dollars, and hundreds of hours in the air. Then a new voice cut through. Is that really necessary? It came from Jessica Reyes, a flight attendant watching from the jet bridge. She didn't sound confrontational, just confused. Karen shot back. Nice girls don't try to scam their way into first class. Zara's phone buzzed again. Dad emergency line. She looked at Maya, who shook her head slightly. We can handle this ourselves, Maya whispered. 6:54 p.m. 4 minutes to boarding. Brad tapped away on his laptop. No system red flags, he admitted. Tickets look legit. Karen leaned in. The tickets appear legit. But look at them. They couldn't afford this. Look at them. A new voice repeated. Sarah Kim, a blogger with a press badge and a camera, had arrived. And we're recording everything. The stream surged again, 1:847. The hashtag #GirlsAtGate42 began trending locally. Karen's voice cracked a little. I'm calling district management. She grabbed her phone. Jennifer Gate 42. We've got 2 girls refusing to take their proper seats. Yeah, I'll hold. The girls didn't flinch. Their posture, still flawless, still calm. Their father had trained them well. Stay composed. Don't react emotionally. And most of all, never let someone else define your worth. Maya and Zara stood still, scanning the crowd. The stares, the side eyes, the judgments. They weren't passengers anymore. They were a spectacle. 3 minutes to boarding. A video call connected. Jennifer Walsh, district supervisor, appeared on Brad's tablet. What's going on, Brad? He turned the screen. 2 passengers. Karen's, concerned about ticket authenticity. They're minors, Karen interrupted, leaning into the camera. Probably stolen cards or fake bookings. I've seen it before. Zara's stream 12,000 viewers. Minors can't purchase first class without authorization, Walsh said flatly. Remove them from the boarding area. A few heads nodded. Others looked disturbed. Maya took a small step forward. Ma'am, we have ID payment receipts and boarding passes. We're just asking for someone to verify that we belong. Walsh didn't budge. Security will escort you to customer service. Then Sarah Kim's voice, steady and firm. What specific policy allows that? Walsh snapped. This is a private airline matter. Public terminal, public right to film, Sarah replied. The clock struck 6:56 p.m. Security arrived. 2 officers, hands on radios, eyes unsure. Ladies, Officer Rodriguez began gently. We'll sort this out downstairs. Zara didn't stop filming. Sort what out? We've done nothing wrong. You're disrupting the process, the second officer, Thompson said. We're just standing here, Maya pointed out. The disruption is around us. The crowd tightened. Cameras everywhere. Phones recording. Girls at Gate 42. Exploded 50,000 mentions in 10 minutes. A white businessman elbowed forward. They're holding up the flight. Sir, step back, Rodriguez warned. Jessica. The flight attendant looked at the clock. First class should be boarding. Should I begin? Walsh, cold and confident, replied from the screen. Absolutely not. Clear this situation first. The girls stood still, waiting, watching. 10 seconds. That's all they'd give. 10 seconds to see who would speak up, who would step in, who would do the right thing. And then they'd act. 6:57 p.m. 3 minutes past scheduled boarding. 10 seconds had passed. But no one stood up. Not yet. Officer Rodriguez stepped a little closer. His expression said he didn't want to do this, but the order was given. Mitchell stood by, smugly, her arms folded across her chest. Brad Chen adjusted his tie again, sweat clinging to his temple. Jennifer Walsh's face glared out from the iPad screen like a distant authority, cold and ready to escalate. Maya glanced at her sister. Just a nod. Zara understood instantly. It was time. Maya cleared her throat gently and spoke up. "One moment, please." Everyone froze. She slowly opened her blazer. Inside, clipped to the lapel, was a small plastic ID card. Officer Rodriguez leaned forward to read it. His eyes widened. "Ems Thompson, Board Observer. Thompson Holdings." Zara opened her blazer, mirroring the move. Her badge matched Z. Thompson, Board Observer, Thompson Holdings. The reaction was instant. Rodriguez took a full step back. Karen Mitchell's face froze, lips slightly parted. Chen looked between the badges and his laptop, as if something wasn't computing. He started typing furiously. The crowd, whispering, murmuring, pulling out their phones to Google. The live stream's chat exploded. "Wait, Thompson Holdings. Aren't they the ones that, holy crap, they built Terminal C? They're the owners, kids." Zara tilted her phone toward the stream, catching it all. The tone of the terminal flipped instantly. Tension snapped into disbelief. Jennifer Walsh, still watching from her tablet, squinted at the screen. "That can't be right." Maya pulled out her phone. Calmly. No panic. No fury. She scrolled to a contact labeled "Only Legal." She tapped dial. It rang once. "Thompson Holdings Legal Department. This is Catherine Mitchell speaking." "Hi, Catherine. Maya Thompson here. Authentication code, Delta 77. Charlie, we're at LAX Gate 42. We have a live discrimination incident. Full documentation package needed." Catherine's voice was crisp. "Understood, Miss Thompson. Are you and your sister safe?" "For now. Stream's running. Viewership 50,000 and rising. We're alerting your father now. Legal is en route." Maya ended the call. Slowly. She didn't have to raise her voice. The silence that followed was total. Even the humming of the air vents seemed muted compared to the tension that clung to the walls of Gate 42. Karen Mitchell. She looked like a person watching her own career dissolve in real time. Her voice cracked. "Thompson Holdings," she whispered, as if the name alone might make the situation vanish. Chen's laptop dinged. He looked down. Google results. Thompson Holdings, $12.7 billion annual revenue. Aerospace defense contractor. Lead investor in LAX Terminal C reconstruction. His jaw dropped. Officer Rodriguez took another step back from the girls, now visibly rattled. "Ma'am," he said to Karen Mitchell, "I think we need to reassess this situation." Walsh's voice came through the iPad. "What's happening? I can't see clearly on this screen." Chen stammered. "The girls, they work for Thompson Holdings." "That's not possible," Walsh snapped. "They're children." Maya looked directly into the camera, her voice calm, her posture unshakable. She raised her phone again, this time not to film, but to show another contact. The screen read "Dad, emergency line." She turned it toward the crowd, toward Walsh's frozen face on the tablet. "Would you like me to call him?" she asked. The crowd sucked in air. The stream viewer count hit 98,000. Comments flew by too fast to read, but trending hashtags now included. "Hey Thompson twins. Girls at Gate 42. Airport discrimination. At Daddy owns the terminal." Sarah Kim stepped closer, capturing every angle with her camera. For our viewers just joining, we're witnessing what appears to be a discrimination incident involving two young black women who just revealed they are board observers for the company that funded most of this terminal. A businessman in the back pulled out his phone. "I need to document this for my company's diversity training." The elderly black woman, who had earlier offered to help, now stood with her arms crossed, a proud smile forming. "Sweethearts," she said softly, I'm so sorry you had to go through this, but I'm proud of how you handled it. Thank you, ma'am, Zara said, still filming. We learned from the best. Mitchell tried to salvage what was left. Look, obviously, there's been a misunderstanding. If you really do work for that company, Maya cut in gently. You mean Thompson Holdings, the aerospace contractor that holds nearly $850 million in annual contracts with this airline. Brad Chen looked like he'd just swallowed a cactus. I'm seeing the contract now, he muttered. There's a vendor clause. Section 12.3 says that all Thompson family members and employees are entitled to non-discriminatory service. His voice faded. Walsh finally spoke again. That's enough, she snapped. Let them board. This incident is over. Zara didn't blink. Her voice carried across the terminal like a gavel. Actually, it's just beginning. She turned her phone's camera back to Walsh's iPad feed. Ms. Walsh, you just ordered security to remove 2 paying passengers. Live, in front of 98,000 people. On record, with no policy violation. I was following protocol, Walsh insisted. What protocol allows you to remove passengers based on appearance? Maya asked, her voice low controlled. We have procedures. Which ones? Please be specific, Zara pressed. The silence said everything. Behind Walsh, a phone rang and rang on her desk. Nobody answered it. Mitchell, desperate now, stepped in again. Girls, let's just get you boarded and forget all this ever happened. Maya raised an eyebrow. Forget. She slowly turned, showing the rows of passengers still filming. Still recording. Do you really think forgetting is an option? The air grew thick, and then a new voice cut through the tension. Excuse me. Is there a problem here? All eyes turned. A woman in a pilot's uniform stepped forward. She looked early 40s, confident, calm. A name tag gleamed on her chest. Captain Rebecca Santos. Captain Chen said nervously. We're just resolving a small boarding mix-up. Santos raised a brow. Doesn't look small. What's the delay? Mitchell jumped in. These two were questioned about their first-class tickets. Santos turned to Maya and Zara. May I see your boarding passes? They handed them over. Santos checked the names, then cross-referenced them with the manifest. Seats 1A and 1B. Maya and Zara Thompson. She confirmed. Is there a problem? No, Chen said quickly. Just verifying a few things. Santos narrowed her eyes. And what exactly needed verification? The question floated in the air like smoke. No one dared answer it. Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and then smiled. Captain Santos, she said. I believe my father has been trying to reach you. Santos blinked. Your father? Robert Thompson, Zara said calmly. He's been waiting to taxi for 15 minutes. The captain's face changed instantly. Robert Thompson. He's flying with us today, no, Maya said. He's flying us. She nodded toward the tarmac. The captain turned and looked. There, just outside, a sleek corporate jet idled. Its logo, Thompson Holdings, gleamed in the setting sun. Through the window, a man in a pilot uniform sat in the cockpit, speaking into his headset. Santos whispered, Oh my God, that's Robert Thompson. Behind her, Chen's laptop chimed. A message popped up. Priority passenger coordination request from Thompson Holdings, corporate jet. Requesting immediate boarding clearance for passengers, Maya and Zara Thompson. The engines of the jet growled louder this time. Maya looked around the terminal, then back at Santos. He's been waiting for us. He doesn't like to be kept waiting. Karen Mitchell stood frozen. Her smugness had vanished, replaced by a pale, shaky confusion. Brad Chen no longer fidgeted. He was paralyzed, staring at the message on his screen. Jennifer Walsh's expression on the iPad was a mix of panic and disbelief. Her mouth slightly open, like she'd just realized the hole she'd dug was deeper than she could climb out of. The live stream viewer count passed 127,000. Maya took out her phone again and scrolled to a contact labeled Dad, emergency line. Her finger hovered above the name. Should she? Zara leaned in. Should I call him now? The terminal was dead silent. Maya's finger tapped the screen. The call connected immediately. Sweetheart, came the warm but unmistakably commanding voice of Robert Thompson. What's taking so long? I've been holding position for 12 minutes. Maya put the call on speaker. Hi, Dad. We're having a small issue at gate 42. There's some confusion about our tickets. There was a pause that seemed to freeze the entire terminal. What kind of confusion? His voice dropped an octave, still calm, but now dangerous. Captain Santos instinctively stepped forward. Mr. Thompson. This is Captain Santos. I apologize for the delay. We're resolving a minor administrative. I've been listening to Tower Communications. Robert interrupted, his voice cool and clipped. My daughters were scheduled to board 15 minutes ago. What's the situation? The crowd leaned in. Even phones stopped filming for a second just to listen. Jennifer Walsh jumped in from the iPad. Mr. Thompson. This is Jennifer Walsh, District Supervisor. There was a small misunderstanding about seat verification procedures. Robert repeated her words back slowly. Seat. Verification. Then came a beat of silence so complete you could hear someone coughing near gate 43. Captain Santos attempted a rescue. Sir, I wasn't involved in the initial interaction. Dad, Zara spoke up, her voice steady. They said our tickets were probably fake. They called security to remove us from the terminal. There was a pause again, only this one felt colder. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. They called security, Robert said softly, on my daughters. Because they were in first class. The corporate jet engines outside rose in pitch, as if echoing his rising fury. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, we were responding to a gate agent's request. We never actually. Officer, what's your name? Robert cut him off. Rodriguez, sir. Terminal security. I want you to know your professionalism is noted. Our security coordinator will be in touch regarding training. Rodriguez blinked, unsure if that was a compliment or a warning. Now Robert continued, I want to speak with the person who made the decision to call security on my daughters. Maya turned her head slightly. No words, just a pointed finger, straight at Karen Mitchell. And the district supervisor, Maya added calmly, Jennifer Walsh. There was a crackling pause. Mitchell, Walsh, you're both still there, Robert asked. Yes, sir, Mitchell stammered. Yes, Mr. Thompson, Walsh said, barely above a whisper. Excellent. I'd like to share some information. With you, with the airline, and with Maya. How many people are watching your live stream right now? She glanced at Zara's phone. 167,000. Robert's voice shifted into corporate presentation mode, the kind of tone that's used in boardrooms right before a merger or a firing. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson Holdings maintains $847 million in annual contracts with this airline. We've held these contracts for 7 years. Section 12.3 of our vendor agreement states explicitly that all Thompson family members and employees are to be treated with dignity and without discrimination. He let it hang. Walsh stayed silent. Robert continued casually but firmly. In addition, Thompson Holdings provided $127 million in direct funding for the LAX Terminal C renovations completed last year, Gate 42. The one you're standing in, we built it. Brad Chen's screen blinked again. He was reading, visibly sweating. Our aerospace division, Robert said, provides maintenance services for 34% of this airline's domestic fleet. Our insurance subsidiary underwrites $2.3 billion in airline liability coverage. Our logistics division coordinates 12% of their cargo operations. Each number landed like a hammer. Walsh finally croaked, I assure you, This was an isolated incident. Isolated, Robert repeated with disdain. Ms. Walsh, my daughters are 17 years old. They've flown first class since they were 10. They've never been questioned, never been doubted, never been asked to prove they belonged in their seats. What changed today? Everyone knew the answer, but no one had the courage to say it out loud. Robert didn't need them to. I'll tell you, he said. Today they flew alone. Today, for the first time, they didn't have their white father standing next to them. And suddenly, their presence in first class became irregular. The terminal shifted again. You could feel the weight of the moment, the sting of the truth. Karen Mitchell opened her mouth to protest. I never said anything about race. You didn't have to, Maya interrupted. You called us irregular. You said our seats weren't for people like us. You assumed we used stolen credit cards. You labeled us entitled, all without asking a single question about our reservation. Walsh stared blankly at the screen. Sarah Kim zoomed in for the live stream. Mr. Thompson, she asked, what do you plan to do about this situation? Robert's tone changed again, calm, calculated. Excellent question. First, I want written apologies from Ms. Walsh and Ms. Mitchell within 24 hours. Not a form letter, not a corporate PR statement, a personal apology, with specifics. Of course, Walsh said quickly. Second, he said mandatory bias training for all customer service employees at LAX. Real training. Not a 1-hour video. I want scenario-based sessions, role-play, measurable outcomes. That would be expensive, Walsh muttered. Robert didn't miss a beat. Thompson Holdings spent $847 million with your airline last year. The cost of training is a rounding error. Everyone flinched. Third, Robert continued a new passenger dignity protocol. No customer questioned, based on appearance, age, or assumed status. Ever. Captain Santos nodded. That's a reasonable request. Fourth, independent audits. Passenger treatment tracked and reported publicly, especially for youth and people of color. You'll bring in a third party, and you'll publish the results. The list kept coming. Precise, unshakable, non-negotiable. Then finally, his voice softened just slightly. And last, I want my daughters to know their dignity matters more than contracts, more than money, more than convenience. Maya, Zara, are you ready to come home? Maya looked at Zara. Zara looked at the plane. Actually, Dad, Maya said, we'd still like to take this flight. We paid for these seats. We'd like to use them, Zara confirmed. Robert paused. Then with a proud chuckle, then you'll use them. He turned serious again. Captain Santos, I assume there will be no further delays? None, sir. I'll begin boarding now. Robert's voice gentled one last time. Maya, Zara, text me when you land. We will, Dad. Love you. Love you too, girls. And I'm proud of how you handled this. The call ended. Gate 42 was silent. The live stream viewership ticked past 203,000. Jennifer Walsh and Karen Mitchell stood like statues. Maya and Zara handed over their tickets. Karen's hands shook slightly. Welcome to Flight 447, she whispered. We're honored to have you aboard. The twins walked down the jet bridge, heads high, calm as ever. And through the glass, the man in the cockpit of the corporate jet raised a hand in quiet salute. His daughters waved back. The jet bridge was quiet, except for the soft thuds of Maya and Zara's shoes against the carpet. Inside the plane, first-class passengers who had been watching from the sidelines now looked up with a mix of curiosity, admiration, and guilt. The girls slid into seats 1A and 1B. Behind them, murmurs and side glances continued to ripple across the cabin. Some passengers looked down, others nodded respectfully. A few even offered apologetic smiles, as if trying to wordlessly say, "We see you now." The plane hadn't even left the ground, But a cultural shift had already taken flight. From their window, the girls could see the corporate jet still parked. The Thompson Holdings logo glinted against the terminal floodlights. The engines idled, a reminder of who was watching and who had just made the world pay attention. Back in Gate 42, silence slowly gave way to a buzz of urgent conversation. People whispered, filmed, uploaded. The trending hashtags were now top 5 in the U.S. At girls at Gate 42. Dignity first class. Thompson twins. Respect. All passengers. Hey Dad owns the terminal. 30 days later, the airline industry was still reeling. Karen Mitchell sat stiffly in a brightly lit training room at LAX. She wasn't wearing her usual blazer and name tag. Today, she was just another student. Day 5 of bias training. This wasn't the usual slide deck surface level workshop. This was something else entirely created and funded by Thompson Holdings diversity consultants. There were real scenarios, body cam footage, passenger interviews, hard truths. The instructor turned to Karen. Ms. Mitchell, he said, can you tell us what you've learned from the Gate 42 incident? She hesitated, then nodded. I learned that I made assumptions based on appearance and age. I assumed 2 young black women couldn't afford first-class tickets. I assumed their success was fake. And I treated them as a threat instead of as customers. The instructor nodded. And how did that affect your behavior? Karen took a breath. I humiliated them. I called security. I reinforced a system that treated them as guilty until proven innocent. What would you do differently now? I'd ask questions professionally. I'd keep my bias in check. I'd remember that dignity is part of customer service. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. From the weight of knowing she'd been the reason for someone else's pain. Across the country, similar trainings were underway. Every employee in the airline's 847 locations was enrolled in mandatory bias awareness and de-escalation sessions. Not just because of what happened at Gate 42, but because they got caught. And because the world was watching. The passenger dignity protocol had been officially implemented. No customer could be questioned about their ticket based solely on appearance or age. Any pattern of bias-based flagging was automatically audited. A new internal system triggered a bias alert if customer reps tried to override valid first-class tickets more frequently with certain racial or age groups. New technology backed it all up. Every time a gate agent questioned a ticket, the system cross-checked it against behavior patterns. If bias was suspected, the software flagged it in real time, and a supervisor was notified immediately. There was more. A new mobile app called Dignity Check let passengers anonymously rate their experience as they passed through check-in and boarding. If passengers felt discriminated against, they could submit a report that went straight to a third-party audit team, not internal HR. And the results? The numbers spoke volumes. Passenger satisfaction among travelers of color jumped 12%. Customer service complaints dropped 18%. Incidents involving unwarranted ticket verification fell by nearly 40%. But perhaps most powerful of all, the culture began to shift. Flight attendants spoke of increased mutual respect. Agents described feeling relieved that clearer standards were now in place. Security officers were trained to de-escalate, not dominate. Brad Chen, the gate supervisor who'd stood silently during the Gate 42 confrontation, had been reassigned. Not fired, but moved to cargo operations where he wouldn't interact with passengers again until completing 80 hours of sensitivity training. He now carried a digital badge on his terminal. Every passenger deserves dignity. Jennifer Walsh, however, faced the full weight of accountability. She issued a public video apology viewed over 2.3 million times. In it, she didn't dodge. She didn't spin. She looked directly into the camera and said, I failed as a leader. I allowed discrimination to occur under my supervision. I prioritized procedure over people. I allowed bias to dictate action, and I am deeply sorry." She then outlined the changes her office had made to prevent future incidents, audits, training, real-time monitoring. "This isn't about protecting our brand anymore," she said. "It's about restoring our values." And she meant it, because the world wasn't just watching. They were expecting better. But the transformation wasn't just about apologies and training. Thompson Holdings wasn't finished. They took it further. They embedded anti-discrimination clauses into every single vendor contract across their entire network, not just with airlines, but with hotels, car rental agencies, retail chains. If a partner company failed to meet dignity standards, the contract was reviewed and revoked. That meant hundreds of companies were now held accountable, not because of law, but because of leverage, privilege. Robert Thompson said in a Harvard Business Review interview, "Comes with responsibility. We don't just want service. We want justice embedded in the system." Back at the airline, there were new internal awards, not just for efficiency or upselling, but for compassionate service. Employees who demonstrated empathy, fairness, and de-escalation skills were recognized and rewarded. The changes weren't easy. Some employees resisted, others left. But the ones who stayed, they adapted, grew, learned. Karen Mitchell completed her training and ironically was offered a new role. Diversity advocate, customer experience division. It wasn't a PR stunt. She had to apply. Interview, pass a panel review. But she made it. And at her first training session, standing before a room full of skeptical gate agents, she introduced herself simply, "I was the agent at Gate 42. I was wrong. Let me tell you what I learned." By month 2, what happened at Gate 42 wasn't just a viral moment. It had become a business case, a corporate playbook, and a moral wake-up call. The ripple effect was undeniable. Other airlines began paying close attention, not because they suddenly discovered a conscience, but because they'd seen what happened when bias went viral. Shareholders didn't like lawsuits. Customers didn't like tone-deaf apologies. And 203,000 people watching a live stream. That wasn't a public relations nightmare. It was a full-blown revolution in customer accountability. Thompson Holdings called it the dignity standard. Other companies called it the future of customer service. And the federal government, they started writing it into policy. 3 months later, the Department of Transportation announced sweeping reforms to how passenger discrimination was tracked, investigated, and penalized. For the first time in U.S. aviation history, a set of equity compliance measures became mandatory for all commercial airlines. This included real-time passenger grievance monitoring, bias response auditing, mandatory quarterly reporting on complaints involving race, age, or gender, and in the center of it all, Gate 42. It had become a shorthand, a symbol, a cautionary tale told in every training session from JFK to LAX. Schools adopted the story too. Business ethics classes dissected the incident, asking students to identify what went wrong, and more importantly, what should have happened instead. Sociology professors pointed to the live stream and used it to explain the modern intersection of race, age, class, and visibility. Law students referenced the contracts, how Section 12.3 went from fine print to front-page news. How Maya and Zara never raised their voices, never demanded revenge, just accountability. Meanwhile, the twins were building something of their own. Maya had made her decision she'd pursue law, specifically civil rights law. The incident at Gate 42 hadn't just been traumatic, it had been educational, illuminating. "I learned something powerful that day," she said at a student panel at UCLA. The most effective tool against systemic bias isn't rage. It's understanding the system better than the people who run it. Zara took another route: business ethics and corporate responsibility. Her view: companies control culture more than courts do. If they're going to hold the power, they need to hold the responsibility too. The two sisters weren't interested in becoming influencers. They didn't sell merch. They didn't turn their live stream into a platform for outrage. Instead, they launched a nonprofit, the Dignity in Travel Scholarship Fund. Its mission was simple: give underrepresented youth the chance to travel, learn, and grow. Because travel broadens perspective, Zara said during the launch event. And when young people see the world, they stop seeing limits. The program didn't just fund plane tickets, it funded confidence. By the end of year one, 247 students had flown on their very first plane ride thanks to the initiative. Most were teenagers from underserved communities. Many had never even been to an airport. They visited museums in D.C., toured colleges in Boston, attended youth conferences in Atlanta. They sent postcards back to the Thompson sisters, thank you notes, selfies in front of monuments, each one a ripple from that one day at Gate 42. Back in the corporate world, the transformation continued. Airline stock initially dipped after the scandal, 3% in the first 2 weeks. But within 6 months, it rebounded higher than ever before. Why? Because customers noticed. Satisfaction ratings among passengers of color jumped 28%. The airline had been hemorrhaging trust for years quietly, silently. Passengers had accepted it because it was just how it was. Now it was different. Passengers reported being treated with more respect. Gate agents smiled more. Security officers were gentler. And ticket checks, rarely a spectacle anymore. Other companies started copying. Hotels added dignity audits to their front desk protocols. Retail chains launched bias check systems for their loss prevention teams. Rideshare platforms introduced updated passenger complaint categories focused on discrimination. It had become clear bias wasn't just a moral issue, it was a business risk. At Thompson Holdings, Robert Thompson made it official. No vendor could partner with them unless they signed a dignity clause. The clause required non-discriminatory treatment of all employees and customers, annual training on unconscious bias, immediate review and correction of any incident that mirrored Gate 42. By Q4 1v6, companies had signed on. A new network of dignity-focused corporations was forming not out of charity, but out of strategy. Because, in the age of smartphones, every customer interaction had the potential to go viral. 1 year after the incident, Sarah Kim, the blogger who had filmed and streamed the confrontation, published a book, Gate 42: Race Power and the Quiet Revolution. It wasn't just a retelling, it was a call to action. She interviewed airline workers, passengers, executives, and even Karen Mitchell herself, who had now become a sought-after diversity trainer. Her opening line, "I was the gate agent at Gate 42. I was wrong. Let me tell you what I learned." Her story was raw, humbling, and real. She didn't try to justify her actions. She explained her mindset, how bias crept in quietly, how training helped her see what she had once been blind to. By the book's release, Karen had spoken at 14 major conferences and helped train over 4,000 airline employees. Redemption wasn't just possible, it was visible. But the real legacy, it was written into the hearts of every young person who watched that live stream, who saw two girls stand their ground without screaming, who saw strategy win over outrage, who learned that power wasn't always loud, it was precise. One young viewer, a 13-year-old girl named Amaya from Chicago, sent Maya and Zara a letter that simply read, "I saw you that day, and I realized I'm allowed to belong wherever I show up prepared." Back in LAX Terminal C, Gate 42 looked like any other gate. People waited, scrolled their phones, ate overpriced sandwiches. Boarding calls echoed through the air. But if you looked closely, there was a new plaque on the wall. Simple, unobtrusive, but powerful. It read, in honor of Maya and Zara Thompson, who stood with dignity. Gate 42 is a reminder that justice begins with presence. Every now and then, passengers would stop and take a picture. Some didn't know the story, others knew it by heart. 2 years after the incident at Gate 42, the world had changed subtly at first, then all at once. And not just because of viral outrage, not because someone got canceled, but because two teenagers, armed with calm voices and undeniable credentials, challenged an entire system with poise and won. The Dignity in Travel Scholarship Fund had expanded internationally. Maya and Zara's nonprofit, originally intended to support a few dozen domestic students, had now funded flights for 247 youth across 18 countries. Their mission: give young people the chance to see the world and know their place in it. Each traveler received more than a ticket. They got a mentor, a passport wallet with the fund's logo, a journal, and a card that read, "You belong here, not because someone allowed you, because you earned it." The impact measurable. 91% of recipients reported increased confidence in pursuing higher education. 76% said their career aspirations shifted after traveling. 1/3 had never left their hometown before their flight. Zara spoke at an international travel summit in Berlin, where she said, "We don't just fly to see the world. We fly to realize we're part of it." The fund received donations from celebrities, CEOs, and former passengers who had witnessed the Gate 42 incident live. One anonymous donor sent $500,000 with a note for the next generation of leaders. No gate should ever be a barrier. Meanwhile, Maya had finished her first year of law school. She was already being invited to speak on civil rights panels and policy roundtables. Her presence was undeniable, not because she was famous, but because she was precise, focused, and grounded. In one panel on systemic bias in transportation, Maya laid it out clearly. Systems don't change from exposure alone. They change when exposure is followed by education, accountability, and policy. She wasn't interested in viral moments. She was interested in legal frameworks. At age 20, she was already drafting model legislation that would later be reviewed by the Department of Transportation. Zara, on the other hand, had launched a consulting firm focused on corporate ethics and anti-discrimination protocols. Her first clients, airlines, of course, but soon after hospitality, groups, rideshare platforms, and even tech companies looking to avoid their own Gate 42 moment. One CEO, during a private training session, asked her bluntly, "How do we fix this without it becoming a PR nightmare?" Zara replied with equal bluntness, "You can't skip to the optics. You have to fix the culture first, or the cameras will do it for you." She wasn't there to soothe egos. She was there to build structures that would outlive the scandal. Her framework, the Thompson standard, became shorthand in the corporate world for respect-centered service, transparent escalation protocols, measurable accountability for biased behavior. She delivered keynotes at business conferences, including one particularly unforgettable talk at Harvard Business School titled, "Your Bias is Costing You Millions." The impact of that one day at Gate 42 still growing. Discrimination complaints across major U.S. airlines dropped by 34%. Customer satisfaction ratings from Black and Latino passengers rose 28%. The phrase Gate 42 became a verb in some industries. Don't Gate 42 this. Run this protocol before we have a Gate 42. We need a Thompson clause in this vendor agreement. And passengers, they felt it. A Black teenager flying solo for the first time in Atlanta posted a video saying, "They didn't side-eye me at the gate. They greeted me like I belonged. That's new. That's respect." An older Asian woman tweeted, "I asked for a wheelchair and didn't get an attitude." Thank you, Gate 42 girls. Small shifts, but massive meaning. Back at LAX, Karen Mitchell had transformed too. After her time in training and countless speaking events, she had developed a reputation for being brutally honest about her failure and her growth. Her new role, lead trainer bias and equity division at the airline. She wasn't excused for what happened. She was held to the highest standard, and to her credit, she met it. At a TEDx-style event hosted by Thompson Holdings, Karen stepped onto a stage packed with diversity officers and corporate leaders. She took a breath and began, "I'm not proud of who I was at Gate 42, but I'm committed to who I became after it." She talked about her own blind spots, how she thought she was being procedural when in reality she was gatekeeping access, literally. She ended her speech with the phrase now etched into her department's walls. "You don't have to mean harm to cause it, but once you see it, you're responsible for fixing it." The crowd gave her a standing ovation, not for being a hero, but for doing the work. Jennifer Walsh, the former district supervisor, didn't stay in aviation. After her public apology and resignation, she took a year off. Then, unexpectedly, she reemerged, not as an executive, but as a policy advisor for a national coalition on equitable transportation. She used her mistake as a fuel for reform. In a podcast interview, she said, "I was so focused on protocol, I forgot about people." Gate 42 didn't destroy my career. It rerouted it. And what about the man who started it all? Robert Thompson, the father who had quietly waited in his corporate jet, now sat on a newly formed federal advisory board on transportation equity. He wasn't loud, never needed to be. But when he spoke, people listened. In his opening remarks to the committee, he said, "If your systems require my daughters to carry credentials to prove they belong, then your systems are broken. We're not asking for special treatment. We're demanding equal treatment." He didn't just speak for Maya and Zara. He spoke for every kid who had been questioned, ignored, or dismissed. 3 years after Gate 42, Maya and Zara stood on a small stage at the Global Inclusion Conference in New York. No cameras, no press, just a room full of youth from around the world, activists, students, dreamers. Zara took the mic first. "We never set out to go viral. We just didn't want to be silenced." Then Maya, "You don't need a billion-dollar dad to stand up. You need courage, clarity, and community." They smiled, hugged, sat down. The room erupted in applause, not because of a scandal, but because of the system they helped rebuild. Back at LAX, Gate 42 now featured something new. Not a security scanner, not a new boarding system. A mirror mounted near the check-in kiosk. On it was engraved, "Look at the passenger in front of you. Ask yourself, am I seeing their ID or just their identity?" 3 years. That's all it took for one gate, one moment, one decision to become a benchmark across an entire industry. And not because of rage, not because someone screamed, but because Maya and Zara Thompson had done something much harder. They stayed calm, collected, and undeniably right while the world watched them being wronged. The legacy of that moment extended far beyond LAX. It became personal for people who'd never even flown. And it became policy for people who once thought dignity was just a soft word for optional. In Washington, D.C., a congressional subcommittee on transportation equity had convened for its annual session. The hearing room was polished cameras in every corner, microphones blinking red. Seated at the witness table was Maya Thompson, now 20, now a second-year law student, now one of the most recognized voices in civil rights advocacy. "Ms. Thompson?" the chairwoman asked. "Do you believe the incident at Gate 42 was unique?" Maya didn't hesitate. "No, ma'am. It was just visible." The room quieted. "It happens every day," she continued. "To passengers of color, to young people, to single moms, to disabled travelers. You just don't see it on a live stream with 200,000 people watching." A ripple of agreement swept through the chamber. "So, what's the goal of this legislation?" another congressman asked. "Our goal isn't to punish," Maya said evenly. "It's to prevent," and that's what made her so powerful. She wasn't angry. She was strategic, and it made everyone else sharpen up. The bill on the table, the Passenger Equity Act, was directly inspired by Gate 42. Its core requirements: clear criteria for boarding denial, no more gut-feeling excuses, independent bias audits conducted semi-annually, public reporting of discrimination-related incidents, automatic alerts. When a passenger's legitimacy is questioned without policy violation. It wasn't just theoretical. It was practical, achievable, already modeled by companies that had adopted the Thompson standard. One senator looked over his glasses and asked Maya, "How do you feel about your name being tied to all of this?" Maya smiled. "If it helps other people fly without fear of being questioned, then it's not my name, it's everyone's." Meanwhile, Zara had become a name in boardrooms. Her consulting firm, ZT Ethics, had landed contracts with 42 Fortune 500 companies. Not just airlines anymore. Banks, retail, hospitality chains, even healthcare systems. She wasn't selling diversity statements. She was selling operational integrity. In one particularly tense board meeting with a global hotel chain, an executive said, "We haven't had a Gate 42 situation." Zara replied without blinking, "You just haven't been filmed yet." Silence. She followed up with a quiet bombshell. Bias doesn't wait for the cameras to roll, but accountability should. Her firm helped rewrite internal policies, retrain executive leadership, and build equity dashboards that tracked staff behavior in real time. And companies loved it. Not because it was cheap, because it worked. Zara's specialty: making ethics measurable. Back on the ground, passengers felt it. An 11-year-old girl, flying solo from Houston to Chicago, was greeted by name at the gate. The agent knelt down, smiled, and said, "Welcome aboard. We're lucky to have you." No spectacle, no viral video, just quiet progress. A retired Latino veteran in Phoenix reported, "For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged in first class. I just showed up." A Muslim woman flying with her 2 young sons said she no longer felt the quiet suspicion she'd grown used to. It's like something shifted, and I think those girls had something to do with it. Robert Thompson was still moving pieces behind the scenes. He'd never gone on a media tour, never milked the moment. But his influence, undeniable. He quietly funded research on bias in global transportation, supported startup technologies aimed at neutralizing discriminatory algorithms, even partnered with universities to create the first Passenger Dignity Index, a data-driven tool that measured airports by how fairly they treated travelers. In a rare speech at a transportation summit, Robert shared something few had heard before. "The day I saw my daughters questioned at that gate, I wanted to land that jet walk into the terminal and end every career involved. But they didn't need me to storm in. They needed me to build something behind them, and I did." He looked around the room of executives and government officials. "If your policies don't protect passengers, like my daughters, then your policies don't protect passengers. Full stop." Sarah Kim, the blogger who had gone live at Gate 42, had gone from independent journalist to published author to media accountability advisor for several major news outlets. She had created guidelines on how to responsibly cover real-time discrimination without exploiting the victims. Her book, The Quiet Revolution, was now required reading in several journalism schools. She summed it up simply: Maya and Zara didn't go viral because they got angry. They went viral because they stayed composed and let the world see how ugly the system can be, even when the victims stay graceful. And what about the airline? Their transformation was the most surprising of all. They had taken the hit, publicly, painfully, but instead of covering it up, they overhauled everything. Every terminal now featured a dignity coordinator, a trained staffer with the sole role of monitoring bias, de-escalating conflict, and protecting passenger rights. Customer service interactions were randomly audited monthly, not to catch employees off guard, but to build a habit of equity. And the internal culture, that changed too. New employees before learning how to scan a boarding pass, had to complete 12 hours of bias and emotional intelligence training. Gate 42 was no longer that place where it happened. It was now the standard. Every year, on the anniversary of the incident, the airline hosted a quiet ceremony at Gate 42. No press, just staff travelers and a few young passengers, some from the scholarship fund, others flying solo for the first time. They'd gather by the plaque, look into the mirror mounted next to it, and read the engraving aloud together. Am I seeing their ID or just their identity? And then they'd board. Not because someone had to call a lawyer, not because someone had to go live, but because they belonged. 4 years since Gate 42. By now, the Thompson twins had grown beyond the roles that defined them during that fateful evening. They weren't just passengers. They weren't just daughters. They weren't even just symbols anymore. They were leaders, quiet, consistent, and strategic. And their influence was everywhere. On a warm spring day in Atlanta, a group of middle schoolers gathered inside an airport lounge marked with a new name, the Maya and Zara Thompson Youth Traveler Center. Inside were charging stations, quiet reading areas, travel assistants, kiosks, and guidance counselors. The space wasn't a luxury lounge. It was a safe space designed for young solo travelers who might otherwise be overlooked or questioned. The sign at the entrance read, "Confidence is the carry-on you can't lose." A boy, no older than 13, heading to Washington for a robotics competition, sat near the corner with wide eyes and a boarding pass gripped tightly in his hand. One staffer approached him and smiled. "You good?" He nodded. "My teacher said some girls made this place," he added quietly. "They got kicked out of first class, and now they help other kids travel like they did." Not kicked out. The staffer corrected gently. Tried. But they knew better. And now, so do we. In a boardroom in San Francisco, Zara Thompson was presenting to the leadership team of one of the world's largest tech companies. Her slides didn't show pie charts. They showed faces, statistics, moments of inequity captured on surveillance footage or customer reviews. Each slide was titled with one question: how much does dignity cost? Zara stood calmly in front of the room, wearing the same quiet authority she'd once displayed in that terminal. Bias is expensive, she told the group. It costs you in lawsuits. It costs you in talent retention. It costs you in consumer trust. But most of all, it costs people their peace. A senior VP asked, "How do we know if it's working?" Zara didn't blink. "You'll know when you stop getting thank you notes from people for doing what should have been normal all along." Maya, now a civil rights attorney, was preparing for her biggest case yet. Not against an airline, not against a corporation, against a city. A class action lawsuit had been filed on behalf of dozens of passengers who had been wrongly profiled and detained during routine public transportation stops. Maya represented them all. At a press conference, a reporter asked if her background at Gate 42 made her biased. Maya smiled. "It made me prepared." And she meant it. She understood systems, knew the loopholes, anticipated the defenses. But more than anything, she knew how to stay calm in the chaos because she'd lived it. Back at LAX, the transformation was now physical. Gate 42 was no longer just a place with a plaque. It had been redesigned entirely. Glass walls allowed visibility from every angle. Digital displays showed not just flight information, but passenger rights. A live customer satisfaction feed ran across a side wall showing real-time feedback from travelers. Employees who staffed the gate went through a rigorous selection process, chosen not for speed, but for composure, compassion, and equity leadership. Passengers would occasionally stop, look around, and whisper, "This is the gate," as if it were sacred ground. And in a way, it was. A new innovation emerged, the Dignity Index, co-developed by Maya Zara and several university researchers. The Dignity Index was a rating system for companies and airports. It measured how well organizations upheld anti-discrimination protocols based on real data. Unbiased treatment incidents per 10,000 customers. Complaint resolution time. Diversity of customer-facing staff. Use of AI bias flags in customer interactions. The index was published publicly every quarter, and it worked like a charm. Companies that scored high used it in their marketing. Those that scored low scrambled to catch up. No one wanted to be the next Gate 42, but none of it compared to what happened one summer in Geneva. Maya and Zara were invited to speak at the United Nations Youth Leadership Forum. They didn't prepare a flashy presentation. No PowerPoint, no video clips, just their voices. Zara spoke first. We're not activists by profession. We're not influencers. We were just two girls who bought first-class tickets and knew we didn't have to apologize for them. Then Maya, we didn't ask for cameras. We didn't plan a protest. We just stayed still long enough for the world to notice we weren't the problem bias was. They were given a standing ovation, not just because they were brave, but because they were wise beyond their years. And then came the letter. It arrived on a crisp, white envelope, delivered by hand to the Dignity and Travel Office. No return address, just a monogram seal. Inside was a single sentence. You helped my daughter fly without fear. Thank you. There was a photo too. A young black girl in a wheelchair boarding an international flight with a radiant smile. Behind her, two flight attendants holding a sign that read, Passenger Dignity Protocol in Practice. Seat 1A reserved. Back at the Thompson home, Robert stood in his study holding that letter. He looked out at the yard where Maya and Zara used to play, where he had once taught them how to keep their cool in the face of pressure, how to never lead with anger, but always with facts, grace, and readiness. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. He simply placed the letter next to a small photo of the girls in their school uniforms at 17, the same age they were on that unforgettable day at LAX. He smiled. Not the smile of a CEO, the smile of a father who had watched his daughters rise into history, not with noise, but with nerve. And so the story of Gate 42 lives on, not as a scandal, not as a moment, but as a movement. Because Maya and Zara proved that justice doesn't require shouting. Sometimes it just requires standing still long enough for the world to listen. And when the world listens, change takes flight. It was a sunny morning in New York City when the New York Times dropped its Sunday cover story. A simple headline, The Thompson Effect, How Two Teens Redefined Air Travel. It didn't show Maya and Zara on the cover. Instead, it showed an image of a child boarding a plane unafraid, unaccompanied, and unseen by security. Just seen as a traveler. As she should be. The article chronicled everything, from the spark at Gate 42 to the policy shifts that followed to the lawsuits, the legislation, and the lives changed. But most of all, it focused on the invisible shifts, the way customer service language softened, the way teenage passengers were no longer watched, the way airports had begun to feel different. The piece concluded with this. Airports used to be places where bias traveled freely. But now, at terminals around the world, dignity walks beside you. And if you look closely, you'll see two quiet footsteps leading the way. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, something new was underway, a groundbreaking ceremony. Dozens gathered for the unveiling of a new educational initiative, the Thompson Center for Ethical Leadership and Social Impact, a joint project between Thompson Holdings UCLA and several nonprofit partners. The center would focus on public policy, transportation equity, AI bias and customer service, corporate ethics, youth leadership development. Maya would serve as founding director of legal studies, Zara as director of corporate accountability. The initiative was already being called a think tank for the next generation of changemakers. During the ceremony, a 10-year-old boy from Inglewood asked Maya for an autograph. He handed her a copy of the book, Quiet Revolution by Sarah Kim. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said. Maya knelt to meet his eyes. "You already are," she said. Meanwhile, at Thompson Holdings, HQ, Robert had stepped down from day-to-day operations. In his farewell address, he stood in the same boardroom where billion-dollar deals had once been made. But today, there were no charts, no fiscal slides, just a framed photo on the wall, Gate 42, and below it, a quote from Section 12.3 of the vendor contract: "Service shall be free of bias, visible or invisible." Dignity is not a bonus. It is the baseline. Robert addressed his team one last time. "I built this company for contracts. My daughters helped me reshape it for conscience." At LAX, a new training video was being played in the break rooms of every airline employee. The narrator, Karen Mitchell. Yes, that Karen Mitchell. No longer a gate agent, no longer a scapegoat. Now a teacher. The video showed her sitting in a modest chair, wearing a simple navy dress, no script in hand. She spoke to the camera directly. "I used to think that professionalism meant following protocol no matter what. I've learned since then real professionalism means knowing when the policy is the problem." She paused. "The two girls I questioned were never the threat. My bias was." And then she looked into the lens, clear, steady. You'll face moments when your gut tells you to second-guess someone. Ask yourself, is it their ID or just their identity? On social media, the hashtag #HadGirlsAtGate42 wasn't just trending anymore. It had become a badge. People wore it on pins. Airlines added it to staff lanyards. It was printed on the backs of first-class lounge passes. Even certain apps had badges that could be earned by companies that adhered to dignity protocols. Zara launched a mobile directory called Clear Sky, which rated transportation companies by how well they treated diverse customers. It didn't just help customers, it pushed competitors to meet the bar. When an airline dropped on the list, they felt it in their bookings. When they climbed, they used it in their advertising. One tagline ranked number 2 by Clear Sky: "Working hard to become number 1." The Thompson name had become shorthand for accountability, integrity, and excellence. Then came the flight, the one no one expected. Maya and Zara were invited aboard a historic charter flight, the first global youth summit in the air, with teenage delegates from every continent. The flight had a theme: Dignity Takes Off. On board were young poets from Lagos, activists from Mumbai, robotics champions from Osaka, climate advocates from Rio, and in the front row, Maya and Zara seated side by side just as they had been years ago at Gate 42. A stewardess handed them a small envelope just before takeoff. Inside, a handwritten note: "Dear Maya and Zara, I was the mother watching your live stream at Gate 42. My daughter was with me. She saw everything. Today, she's flying for the first time alone, and she's not afraid. Thank you. Sincerely, a grateful mom." Zara passed the note to Maya. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Outside the window, the plane was lifting off smooth, steady, into skies now shaped by their courage. It had been 5 years since Gate 42. 5 years since 2 teenage girls were asked to prove they belonged. 5 years since an airport gate became a courtroom, a classroom, and a crossroads. 5 years since the world watched dignity go viral, not through outrage, but through restraint. And now, the question wasn't what happened at Gate 42. It was, what changed because of it? In Boston, a group of second-year law students sat in a lecture hall at Harvard. Their professor, Maya Thompson, stood at the front with a whiteboard behind her. The word systems was written in bold. Bias doesn't live in people, she explained. It lives in systems. And systems are made of choices. She looked around at the room of future lawyers. Gate 42 wasn't about a single bad actor. It was about what happens when we let comfort override conscience. One student raised her hand. How do you stay calm when you're the one being tested? Maya smiled gently. You don't wait for calm to arrive. You decide to carry it with you. In New Delhi, Zara Thompson was speaking at a global business ethics summit. She wore a beige blazer, understated but sharp. No PowerPoint, just a stool and a microphone. My sister became a lawyer, she said, because law defines the boundaries of power. She paused, letting the room settle. I became an advisor because business defines the rules people actually feel. Then she looked out at the room, filled with CEOs, founders, and compliance officers. You can't outsource equity to your PR team. You either embed it into your decisions or you wait for the world to catch you failing. Her voice was steady. Her eyes never wavered. Back in the U.S. in Chicago, a teenager stepped up to a TSA agent at O'Hare International. She was 15, black, nervous. It was her first flight heading to a STEM camp in Colorado, funded by the Dignity in Travel Scholarship. The agent looked at her boarding pass, then smiled. You're with the Thompson Fund. The girl nodded. You're gonna do great, the agent said. You've already got the hardest part figured out, showing up. The girl smiled and moved on, unaware that a quiet victory had just happened. She wasn't questioned. She wasn't stalled. She was seen. Meanwhile, at a Smithsonian exhibit titled Justice in the Jet Age, a new installation had just opened. It featured artifacts from pivotal moments in travel equity history. Near the center, displayed inside a glass case, was a platinum American Express card and 2 matching blazers. A nearby plaque read, "Worn by Maya and Zara Thompson during the Gate 42 incident 2025. Their quiet strength reshaped global policy on dignity in travel." Next to it, a touchscreen display showed the live stream that had once shaken the internet. Now, it was curated as history. Visitors paused to read the comments still preserved. What's happening? This is 2025, and this is still happening. They're handling this better than I would. OMG, did she just say Thompson Holdings? A middle-aged couple stood in front of the screen, watching it all unfold. Remember this, the woman said. The man nodded. I was on that flight. I boarded just behind them. Didn't say a word at the time. Wish you had. He looked at the photo of the girls on the wall. Shoulders, squared eyes forward. I wish I'd had their clarity. In a quiet town in Virginia, Robert Thompson sat on his porch, sipping tea. He wasn't running boardrooms anymore. Wasn't coordinating logistics for defense contracts. He was watching the sky. His phone buzzed, a message from Maya. Just finished my last lecture of the semester. Zara's in Nairobi consulting for the transit system there. We're grabbing dinner this weekend. Want to come? He smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. He looked out at the horizon. Planes crisscrossed overhead, tiny streaks in the blue. And he thought about how strange it was, how something as small as an exchange at an airport gate had rewritten part of the global script. His daughters had done what no lawyer, CEO, or politician could have done alone. They'd redefined what dignity in public spaces should look like, not with titles, but with truth. In the sky, above a 747 crossed time zones. Inside, a young girl in seat 1A stared out the window. Her nails were painted. Her shoes scuffed her eyes full of wonder. She wasn't anyone famous, just another kid on her way to somewhere big. A flight attendant passed by and smiled. Everything okay? The girl looked up, startled from her thoughts. Yeah, just thinking. The attendant nodded toward her seat. Good spot. Those 2 girls sat here once. Changed everything. The girl blinked. You mean the Gate 42 sisters? The attendant smiled. We don't call them that anymore. The girl tilted her head. We just call them standard. And that was the legacy. Not drama. Not defiance. Not a viral headline. but a standard, one that quietly rewired how people showed up, got checked in, and felt seen. It was in the way questions were asked, in the way policies were applied, in the way systems finally matched the dignity of the people moving through them. All because two girls once stood still, calmly, confidently, while the world decided whether they belonged. They already knew the answer, and now, so does everyone else.